Alright, hello everyone, Ragnarok here. I just got finished doing my Infinity Blade walkthrough, and as we speak, I am currently uploading. I just wanted. I'm obviously gonna be doing the games, but these two aren't a normal Let's Play video. Aren't a normal Let's Play because the games have a lot that happen between the games. Now there are books on the iPad and iPhone, and all those. That explain what happens between the games. But other than getting them on the tablet or phone or whatever you have, there's no way of finding out, or unless you hear it from somebody. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a quick synopsis of this book and of the first book, Infinity Blade Awakening, and the newest book that just came out, Infinity Blade Redemption. Um, so yeah, um, let's see. There was a prologue here. Basically, it's the first sentence. The first couple sentences was God's death didn't do much to change the lives of the people in Drem's Maw. In fact, most of them didn't even know their deity had been slain. Those who did, however, took advantage. So basically, there's sort of tax collectors, people that enforce the laws of the God King, and again, collect the taxes that he puts out, and basically they've got a little bit more power than everybody else in the area that they kind of reside over. And when they find out that he's been killed by the hero of the previous game, one second, let me plug my computer in. A lot of these local guys start rising up and claiming their own land. So this guy called Wheelix here, and he's kind of saying, God King has made me sort of like mayor, overlord of this area, and you all got to do what I say now. And instead of going to him, you're going to give all your taxes to me and all that kind of stuff. And basically, it's just being a royal asshole. But then a figure in a dark cloak comes up. And this place is called Drem's Maw. It's a little town. Figure in a dark cloak comes up, and while this guy's talking, and there are all these creatures around called Daryls, sort of like the enemies from the first game, basically. It's spelled Daerils. I'm guessing it's Daryls. Could be Daryls, I guess. I don't know. And they're guarding this guy and enforcing what he says in the town. So a stranger comes up, and this new overlord type guy is going to kill somebody to make an example out of him. And the Daryl's weapon, the Daryl that he ordered to kill the guy, his weapon is raised, and there's just like a flash through the air, and the end of the Daryl's weapon falls off. It's been severed from the rest by the Infinity Blade, which is carried by the sacrifice that finally killed the God King, whose name is Cyrus. And it said, let's see, and Cyrus killed all of the Daryls in the place. There was just some general badassery going on, He killed all the Daryls in the place, and he says, let's see, he looks around, points with the Infinity Blade at the people and the monsters that he'd slain, and he pointed out of the mouth-like opening of the cave, because the town is built in a cave. And he says, "Out, never return," and the guy just runs for it. And he turns around, and it turns out that it's Cyrus. As I said, the man that the people had sent to die was the last sentence. Well, second to last sentence. And he said, "I have returned." So in chapter 1, basically Cyrus is sitting in one of the houses, basically, like I guess the town center. I guess I'm not sure. And the guys are saying he wasn't supposed to win. The village elders, he's like, he wasn't supposed to win. And Cyrus was sitting there listening to him talking from another room, and he's holding fenweed soup, a warrior soup. It said it tasted like dishwater, sorry. And somebody else said, we can't exactly blame him for living. And they said, well, he went to fight the God King. We sent him to fight the God King. And basically explains how Cyrus had gone as his father and grandfather and many times great grandfathers had gone over the centuries to fight the God King. Dozens have been sent over the centuries, always from the same family, a family sheltered, protected, hidden by the people of the land. So every 20 years they would send the next man in Cyrus's bloodline to fight the God King. And they called it a sacrifice. It was how they fought back, the only way. They'd live underneath the oppression of the God King. They'd pay nearly all they had in tribute, would suffer the brutality of men like Wheelix, who, up until his power grab, had been a simple tax collector. But they would do this one act of rebellion, one family hidden, one warrior each generation, sent to show that the people of this land were not completely dominated. He wasn't expected to win. He wasn't supposed to be able to win the sacrifice. And Cyrus is thinking about how he had been expecting to maybe get a cut, if he was incredibly lucky, one cut on the God King. And instead he had slain one of the deathless. So they're debating, and he talks about how his mother had gotten him a journal that he could write in on his way to the God King's castle. And he hadn't written anything. He didn't think there was any point because he was going to die. So he pulls out a little piece of charcoal and writes on the page for the first time, the first sentence, "I underlined hate fenweed soup." So in this book, you actually find out a lot more about Cyrus as a person than you ever do in the games. You find out that he's a really good guy. I mean, he's a very unusual guy too. I mean, there's a lot of things he missed out on growing up, and there's a lot of things he wants to experience, like playing with children or playing, with other children, stuff like that. And so the village elders come out, and the main one goes, "We were wondering what it is you intend to do next." And he wanted to visit his mother, and they said, "Yeah, okay, after that." And he said, "Well, I've thought about that a lot." And he said, and he's come to a decision, and he wants to go swimming. And he's going to eat an everberry pie. He's never tasted it. Always on too strict of a diet, training to fight the God King, to eat the pies. He said a warrior cannot afford such frivolity. And he says everybody says that everberry pie is the best type. So yeah, he's a very unusual guy. He has a very different outlook on life than a lot of people do. And the guys ask him if he really killed the God King, if he didn't just sneak in and steal the sword or anything like that. And they asked if Cyrus fought any other deathless, the members of the Pantheon, who were sort of like the leaders of the deathless under the God King. He was like the leader of the leaders. Cyrus said that he dueled some captives in the dungeon, which you'll have seen in the Infinity Blade 1 Let's Play. And so basically they expel him, not expel him, exile him from the village. They say, the Deathless will be angry for him killing the God King. That he, even though he saved them, they would all come looking for the Infinity Blade, because it was all the Deathless have sought it for centuries and millennia and stuff. So basically they just kick him out and invite back the douchebag that he sent away from the town in the beginning, so that they don't look like they're rebelling, so that they look cowed or dominated, as they said. So they kick him out, and he goes and sees his mother, trying to cut wood with an axe, and he can think of 17 different ways to kill a man with that axe. And he can see every single one of them perfectly. And he brings it down and can't even chop a block of wood because he's never tried. He's never been able to. And his mother comes around the side of the house, and she says, "Oh, hey, you finally saw a reason. You actually refused to go to the God King's castle, and I thought you'd never come to your senses. Now and she breaks off as she sees the Infinity Blade by the pile of wood, because it's a blade that everyone in the world knows, even to the smallest kid. And she realized it, and she said, "Oh my God, you actually killed him," and this, that, and the other thing. And she's saying, "Well, we have to go to town. There will be celebrations and feasts and parades in your honor and all that stuff." And he says, well, there will be no celebrations. I've been there already. They could have sent me away. And she said, oh, they're afraid, aren't they? So yeah, he spent some time with his mother, and she said he needs to go finish what he started. And he argued that he did finish it. He did kill a God King. Lots of stuff, lots of stuff. And he went to go and find. So eventually he left to go and find freedom. And in chapter 2, the first paragraph is God King came awake with a deep gasp. It was the uncontrolled gasp of one who had been without breath for too long. The gasp of the dead returning to life, his heart pounding, his eyes opening wide. It was a terrifying, yet exhilarating feeling. It was a feeling he had never wanted to feel again. So he's revived. He comes back and he checks what he calls a dead mind mirror. It said that the mirror would have been called a monitor in earlier eras, but it had been so long since he'd used such terms. It had been so long since he'd stopped using such terms. They could confuse people in this era. And the monitor showed that his body was functioning, that his new body was functioning normally. He stepped into his armor that kind of folded around him, new armor that he'd been wanting to try out for a while. And he's wondering how a young boy could have killed him. And for the first time in his life, he feels true fear because the Infinite Blade could have killed him and should have, and he's not sure why it didn't. And let's see. So basically, some of his devoted are asking if something went wrong. He said, of course not. He didn't want them to know. He checks his screens and he looks about. He checks up on his other castle. And he sees that all 3 of the prisoners in his dungeons were killed. And he realized that the sword was working. It was actually finally capable of killing Deathless. Let's see. He's wondering. He was watching the fight between himself and Cyrus, and he wondered. He said he thought the moves that Cyrus used were really familiar, and he wondered who trained him. And then he finally realized that as it all locked into place, he thought he'd been played masterfully, and he thought, worker of secrets, my, but you are a subtle one. And he sent one of his devoted to send his most skilled of knights, and this is going to pick up in a bit. I'm just going over, the details in the beginning, the exposition and everything. And he had his servants locate Cyrus, seeing that he was crossing his homeland back towards the God King's castle. And so it goes back to Cyrus, and he's thinking, maybe I could buy off the other Deathless, sell them the sword, give it to them. That's what they want. They'll leave my place alone, and I can go back home, and all will be good. And he's like, no, I can't do that. That would, put all of humanity in danger. It's our only hope for survival and freedomness and all that. So he gets back, and a Daryls steps out, and Cyrus kind of raises his sword, and he's like, it looks like he'd have to fight his way back in again. And the Daryl goes, "Great master, you've returned." So he goes inside and he meets this old troll called Kuth, and he finds out that as the slayer of their last leader, he was now their leader, and they were all sworn to obey him. And tries to hack into that console that he saw on the God King's chair in the end of the last game, and it asks him security questions and stuff that he obviously doesn't get right because they're personal to the God King. But he wants to find out information, so he tries to hack into it, and he's like, and the mirror he keeps going, answer incorrect, and he goes, damn it, mirror, please, yes. He asks him how he can find freedom, just like a rhetorical question stuff, So he talks to Kuth, and it turns out that, again, these guys are all sworn to obey him, and, let's see. Kuth doesn't know all that much, even though he's incredibly old for a troll. Oh, Cyrus has a saying called "Hell take me," and Kuth asks why he says it. He says it's a saying from his village and the region in the area. He says these deathless are the gods. They claim to rule the earth and the heavens, and so when we die, we wish for a place where they are not. Better the pains of hell than living in heaven beneath the deathless. So basically, Cyrus is thinking, I'm gonna lay down a false trail, go in completely the wrong direction, so that anybody who's following me won't follow me back home. So he asks Kuth where nearby deathless are, and ones that he can go and fight and kill with the Infinity Blade. And let's see. So suddenly, out of absolutely nowhere, he gets hit by a crossbow bolt right across the cheek that he barely is able to avoid, because he heard a sound and he's able to dodge out of the way, but he gets barely sliced across the cheek by a crossbow bolt. And he comes up and there's this figure across the other side of the room, of the God King's throne room from him. And this creature's got a crossbow, so it shoots at him again. And it's poisoned. And so he had to use a healing ring, which he hadn't wanted to do because they explained that every time you use a healing ring, it takes as much age from your body. It ages your body as much as it would take for the wound to heal. Like if he had a broken arm and it would take 6 months for the wound to heal, it takes 6 months off his body and physically ages him, like beard, longer hair, longer fingernails, all that kind of stuff. So he uses it, and he doesn't die from the poison, obviously, because of the healing ring. And so he's trying to plan his tactical, this, that, and the other thing. And after while he's thinking, a woman's voice calls, "So, you're not dead then?" And she's got a bit of an accent. And she said, "This is very awkward. I'm going to flay that vendor alive. He promised the poison was a three breather. You've taken considerably more than three breaths since I shot you." And she says, I don't suppose you're starting to feel tired? And Cyrus called back, "Afraid not." And she says, "Weak, dizzy, a little peckish?" And he goes, "Peckish?" And she says, "Sure, like something has pecked you, isn't that what the word means?" And when he explains what it means, she says, "Damn," and she says, "Your language is stupid, immortal." Immortal, so she thinks he's the God King. And he tries to explain, and she just tries to kill him anyway, so then when they go back to fighting, and he finds out that she's completely human. When they go back to fighting, the door to the room exploded, and two huge giant golems come in. 50 feet tall, 20-foot swords, and all that kind of good stuff. Things that he's never seen before. And basically they destroy the throne, and Cyrus loses the Infinity Blade. He drops it, and the woman takes it and runs off with it, and makes her escape. And so yeah, he let's see, the throne is destroyed, but somehow the security panel is reset. The security on the God King's his little mirror panel is not mirror, but monitor panel is reset, and it allows Cyrus to start asking questions finally. And so he asks how the magic that allows the God King to summon the sword and shield to him work. And the thing says that the God King's ring, which Cyrus took from him, is a transportation ring. You just snap these 3 fingers together twice, like that, and you'll summon them both. So he uses that to take the Infinity Blade back from the woman who ran off with it, and he hears her yell in frustration, obviously. And so the monitor explains that there's a disc on the Infinity Blade that allows it to be transported. That's how the ring knows what to transport. So he uses that, and then he uses that disc and the Infinity Blade and his own ingenuity and this, that, and the other thing to defeat the 2 golems. And let's see, he manages to kill both of them. And basically, the woman offers to help him, actually, once he kills them. Once he kills the two golems. Because she knows she's not going to get the blade from him after watching him do that. So then it goes back to the God King in the next chapter. And you find out that, he actually purposely reset the security protocols on his throne, so that he would be able to see what Cyrus would do with the blade if he knew about it. And the way he fought told him a lot about Cyrus. Oh, 20 minutes I've already been going. Well, anyway. So yeah, this woman, he finds out that her name is Issa, and he's cleaning up and shaving and everything because of, he grew a beard from the healing ring, and they go back and forth talking about this thing or the other. And she's sarcastic with him at one point, and he says he thinks nobody should look at me like that. I should teach her, show her, make her bow. And he cuts off those thoughts, and he's thinking, where did that come from? I've never thought anything like that before. So he says that he wants to lay a false trail. She says that she can take him anywhere on the island. That they actually live on an island. He thought they just lived on a continent. So it turns out that all the Daryls in the place were actually ordered to serve him, and Cyrus realizes that this means that the God King is still alive, so he runs off and leaves. And he thinks that the Infinity Blade is corrupting him because he starts thinking more of those terrible thoughts. Like when the Daryls betray him, he thinks, traitors, kill them both, bring them pain, make them fear, this, that, and the other thing. And so basically they start traveling together. Cyrus and Issa start traveling together, trying to find some way to fight back. And you find out that she's actually a very funny person, very sarcastic, very witty. There's a part, she wants to get her hands on the Infinity Blade. She's never made that a secret. So she says that she makes a really good cinnamon sweetbread. And she says she agrees to make him some, and she said the price is one sword. Oh, how fortunate you have. Oh, she says, oh, it seems you have one on you. What a fortunate turn of events. And just, witty, funny stuff like that. And you find out that she lives on the mainland and actually speaks a completely different language. So, let's see. Yeah, they spend the first day talking and traveling, and they talk about the Aedes forms and how Cyrus was the sacrifice and killing the God King, and she says that she actually stumbled on one of the Deathless's in rebirthing chambers once, since they're reborn over and over again every time they die. Let's see what else. So yeah, they're traveling, and after the first day, it's not that important. They come across some guys that are going to pay homage to the sacrifice. They don't know that it's Cyrus, obviously, and he hides the Infinity Blade so that they don't know. But they're going to pay homage to the sacrifice, and the way they do this is something I forgot to explain. The God King, after killing the sacrifice, he would dump the body outside the castle and not interfere as people came and took the armor, took the weapons, the shield, and the ring, and took them off. He wouldn't interfere as they did that, and then they would be allowed to bury the body. So that explains why every generation, somebody who is the son of the one that died in the God King's castle got his hands on the armor, because that never made sense if you didn't read this. So that night of the first day that they of their traveling together, the night of that first day, on the first day, he takes a look at Issa's crossbow. He's interested by it, and he asks her about it and stuff. So later that night, he's sleeping, and he wakes up and hears Issa's boot crack on the gravel next to him, and he opens his eyes, and she's got her crossbow to his neck, and she reaches down to take the Infinity Blade, and he snaps his fingers together, the summoning thing, and then he sits up really fast, and she tries to pull the trigger and kill him, except that there's no trigger there to pull anymore. When he looked at it earlier that day, he had put the transportation ring on it, and he had expected the ring to bring him the entire crossbow, but it just brought him the trigger, so it disarmed it anyway. And so she wants to stay with him because if he died, she wanted to be able to take the blade. That was her only price for helping him. If he died, by any hand other than hers, because she had sworn not to kill him, if he died, she would take the blade, which he supposed was fair enough and better than leaving in the hands of the deathless. So he ties her up every night by her suggestion. She suggests that he ties her up every night if he doesn't trust her. And so they keep traveling together. They ride on in silence. They talk every now and then. Oh, they come to this town. They come to this small town, and they think, and Issa says, well, that one way into the town, in this gorge, is the way I would ambush someone if I was looking to, do it. So they're like, oh, we should find a way around, like, the smart people that there are. And just as I was thinking that, Cyrus hears a scream from off in the distance. And and Cyrus goes at that, and she says, the place where I said there might be an ambush, and she says, yeah, looks like someone wasn't smart enough to go around. I advise hanging back to watch, but I suppose you're going to want to go rush and help the fool who... And Cyrus didn't even hear the rest of what she said, because he was already running away to help him. So he finds 4 Daryls there attacking this tiny little person huddled on the ground in a cloak. And he rushes into battle. Not sure if he can even handle 4 Daryls, but he tries anyway. He rushes into battle. And he's trying to hold them off here and there, and he's not doing all that well. And Issa runs in and picks up a sword from one of the ones that he kills and helps him, even though she could have just left him there. And so they're standing back to back, ready to fight, and she says, I believe I warned you that this was the perfect place for an ambush. And they're in the river, because that way he could hear a Daryl coming up behind him if it tried to sneak up on him. And she said, and so her teeth are chattering as she is standing in the river because of the cold. And he says, you did. And I believe I suggested restraint as you charged off like a fool. You did. And she says, well, so long as I'm proven right, I guess I can... Let me try that again. So long as I'm proven right, I guess I can die happy. And cursing your name, of course. So they're fighting, and she takes a stab to the stomach from one of the Daryl's swords, and another 8 Daryls come out as he finishes off the last of the 4. And he realized that something about this situation was familiar, even though he had never fought like this before, even though he had always fought in the Aegis forms, like the first game. Something about this felt familiar, and he finally felt something fall into place. And in apparently a very majestic form, his arms moved, raising the sword as if by their own volition. In his youth, he'd trained his body to follow the instincts of a soldier, performing practice attacks, jabs, and stances until they were second nature. He was familiar with fighting by instinct. He just had no idea where these particular instincts had come from. He snapped his eyes open and spun a complex sword kata. I'm not sure what kata is. I'm sure it's some sort of combat thing. Feet moving quietly in the water, he seemed to dance with the river itself. His blade struck 7 times, because by that point he already killed one of the 8. In rapid succession, each blow precise, each move exact. When he stopped, he held the Infinity Blade before him in a calm 2-handed grip, and 7 corpses just floated away from him. 7 strikes, 7 deaths. That was it. They never stood a chance. Yeah, he had no idea where this came from. He had never fought like that before. He had never done that. And so he tries to get Issa to use his healing ring, and she says, "I can't. It doesn't work like that." And she says, "How can you not know?" And yeah, basically she can't use the healing ring to save herself. It doesn't work that way. Um, and the person that they'd saved comes up, and he's like, "Oh my, oh my, oh my!" And he finds out that it's a little golem, a type of machine type thing, that can take on the shape, not the shape, but well, any shape it wants, but it can take on the material or substance of whatever it touches. Um, and this little thing is called TEL, T-E-L. It's trans-substantive, yeah, something something. um, and I'll tell you when I get to it, but what his name stood for. Um, so it transforms half of its body into metal from the Infinity Blade or from Cyrus's shield or something like that, I don't remember. And half of his body into thread. And makes itself about that big and stitches up her wounds with like incredible precision. And they bandaged her wound and stuff. Yeah, let's see. His name stood for trans-substantive entity, lower class. And Cyrus figures out that Tel was following him, and he gets him to admit it. And he said, "You serve one of the Deathless, don't you?" And he says, "I do." And when asked which one, he said, "I have been commanded not to respond to that question." And he mentions something about QIP, which he later explains as quantum identity pattern. He says, "The individual quantum signature inherent in every sentient being as related to his or her ancestors, sort of like a bloodline or a descended soul." I suppose you could relate it to. I suppose you could relate it to the the genetic memory in Assassin's Creed. And he says it is similar to, but completely separate from, a person's physical DNA. It's sort of like that DNA for their soul. Um, yeah, that's exactly how he explained it, basically. So Cyrus realized that the God King was hunting his family. He wanted his bloodline specifically. He baited them. He created the idea of the sacrifice that they would come to, so that they would come to him and die by his sword, because that would charge up the sword and allow it to kill Deathless, which is what he wanted. And he said, "But what is it about his family that is special?" And Tel replies that, "I am afraid I cannot answer that question, as it would conflict with my orders," which Cyrus found particularly interesting, that he had been ordered not to answer anything about Cyrus's family. So basically, they work to keep Esau alive. Cyrus does some stuff. Tel does some stuff. A lot of meaningless in between that basically gets her back to full health. And Tel says that Cyrus had performed the patterns of true swordsmanship when he killed all those 7 Daryls in the river. And Cyrus asked about them, and he says, "They are of ancient date, the most accomplished art of a warrior, a unity between sword and body. Some Deathless claim it took them centuries of practice to master them. Mortals aren't supposed to be able to grasp them in their short lifetimes." So in other words, it takes them centuries to even learn how to do it and perfect them. And Cyrus has been alive for 20 years, so how does this happen? And he asks how he can possibly know them, and Tel can't answer that. And Cyrus begins to think that he might be a descendant of one of the Deathless, and Tel can't reply. So basically, they travel to Sadie's estate. Let's see. They travel to Sadie's estate, talking about what Cyrus had found out and stuff. And she explains to him that if he can defeat all of Sadie's guards, then she'll grant him a question, because she loves duels. And she's an information dealer, so if anybody's going to know anything about the Worker of Secrets, it's her. And let's see. So he goes in to fight, and he steps up to the first warrior, and the duel begins. And then it says he yanked his sword free of the chest of the last of the guards, dropping the beast like the others before him. And he breathed in and out inside his home for a moment, and then he continued on. He fights the champion of Sadie. And he starts thinking, as he fights the champion, he starts thinking, insolent grub, they use our fighting forms, but they are not worthy. We shouldn't give them privileged positions. Rage Rear was... Sorry if you can see this, I don't know, because my computer starts wanting to go into sleep. So if you can see it, then it means that it'll record even through that. If not, I'm sorry. So, either way, I'm sorry, whatever, anyway. He starts thinking we shouldn't give them privileged positions. Raedrar was a fool, Sadie is a fool. Choosing champions like this encourages them to think themselves special. And so he walks up to Sadie and says, I have come for my question, and she offers to make him her champion. And she says, oh, very well, what great mystery does your small mind ponder? And he says, where can I find the prison that holds the worker of secrets? And she freezes, looking at him, and says, whose child are you? Which immortal's blood do you have in your veins? And he makes her answer, and she says, the Vault of Tears, the place once known as Saranthia. Take a ship due west until you strike land, then climb the mountains to the north. You could find him there. And she looks at the Infinity Blade in Cyrus's hand and says, but you won't. And she hits him with a blast of fire from her ring. And they begin dueling with their weapons, obviously. And it said she was good, not as good as the God King had been, but Cyrus was wounded this time by the fire. So he beats her, kills her, the permanent death this time. He truly kills the Deathless. And once he kills her, he stops and notices in the back of the room, he notices an obelisk like the one that I put in the Infinity Blade into in the God King's dungeons that let me go and kill those 3 guys and then Cyrus's ancestor. And he steps up to it and he starts thinking, let's see. He says, he hesitated then stepped forward, slipping the Infinity Blade into the keyhole of the obelisk. It fit perfectly. What would it open? What secrets would he? And it cuts off, and it said, the obelisk drops sharply into the ground. And reacting quickly, Cyrus tries to summon the Infinity Blade back to him, And a voice behind him says, yes, I thought you might fall for that. And he sees the God King in new armor. And he says, you opened the pathway to my dungeons after all. And he says, I knew you killed the prisoners there, or I know you did, not to mention Arcaran or Archerin, or I'm not sure what, which was the guy in the big metal suit that we killed. He says, which is a pity, he was a useful servant. And Cyrus saw that the God King had come from a doorway that had risen up from the grass behind the building. And he tried to summon it again, and the God King says, that will not work. You don't think we'd create a means of teleportation without creating a means of blocking it as well? And he said, the transportation ring will not work as long as the sword is properly shielded. And he kind of nudges Sadie with his foot, saying, I do believe she was planning on taking the sword and betraying me. I suppose you did me a favor by killing me. Did me a favor by killing her. Pity. And he says, so you do still live. And he asked if the God King was using Tell as a spy, because that's what he'd been thinking the whole time. And the God King says, the trans golem? No, I've been using my ring to listen in, quite useful. He said, why do you think I gave them my minions? He gave every one of his minions in the castle a ring that they usually wore in a pouch or something. Because it allows him to listen in on things that are happening around them. Let's see. And they thought they were being rewarded, and he says, I'd hand them out to those who pleased me, and so they fought for my favor, never knowing that their prizes were the means by which I took care they wouldn't betray me. He said, I never thought one of my foes would actually be able to use them. And Cyrus says, of course you did, no lies, you know what I am, you sought out my lineage. And the God King says, "Oh, I know what you are," and Cyrus can hear the smile in his voice. He says, "Though I am more and more certain that you do not." And he says, "I do wish I knew who sent that trans golem to spy on you." And Cyrus looks around and sees oh wait, sorry, a group of knights pulls the Infinity Blade up to the God King, and he takes it, and he says, "Thank you for returning it to me. I've been worried about safety." Cyrus says, "Give me a sword, duel me." And he says, "I think not. You surprised me last time, and I don't think I'll put myself in that position again." And Cyrus says, "What of honor?" And the God King says, "There are some that give honor, but not you, Ausar. Never you." And he said, "I do believe that time that we fought was the only time in your awful life that you ever showed honor to another." And Cyrus doesn't know what he's talking about, and the God King says, "You really don't, do you? Ironic, what did you do to yourself, Ausar?" And he pulls the blade back to him, and Issa jumps up on a rooftop nearby, and pulls out her crossbow, and points it at the God King's back, and then she moves it slightly and fires it, and it flies out and hits Cyrus directly in the forehead, right about there somewhere. And so going back to the God King, it said Ausar's body jerked with a snap, then toppled back onto the ground. And the God King kind of froze, and that said that had not been part of his plan. So he tells his people to burn Ausar's body, as it was just a husk now. It had nothing to do with him, with Ausar. And he said, "You can take the armor as a prize and recover the ring for him." And he said to burn the body. And he obviously didn't need to worry about an assassination attempt, but what did worry him, was that that the bolt hadn't missed him, that it had actually been meant for the target it had struck. It said, if that was the case, someone had known to kill Ausar before the God King could strike with the Infinity Blade, and that meant that someone understood far more than they should. So basically, Issa kills Cyrus, knowing that he's going to wake up again, and knowing that the God King can't permanently kill him with the Infinity Blade if his soul isn't in that body. In the next paragraph it says, Cyrus awoke with a deep gasp. It was the uncontrolled gasp of one who has been with, Let's start this again. Cyrus woke with a deep gasp. It was the uncontrolled gasp of one who had been without breath for too long, the gasp of the dead returning to life. And he sat up and thought, damnation, I'm one of them. And he hears Issa say, I sat there for hours the first night. And she said, I watched your chest go up and down. I sat there counting to myself, terrified you were one of them. And she knew it. She said she had seen him use one of their rings, heard him claim to have killed the God King with his own sword, fought like one of them, like a creature from another time, too perfect to be completely human. One warrior cannot learn such skill in one lifetime. You fought like a god. So he's starting to realize that he was actually deathless. And basically she felt betrayed, scared, betrayed. She thought that she had been lied to, that he was just trying to use her in some horrible way. And he's thinking back, and he's getting some memories, and he thought, that's who I was, the deathless. That's who I was. That's what I used to be, one of them. And he thinks, oh, Verity, Verity, a name, obviously. And then he started to get some memories back, and then he banished them. He didn't want to know who he had been. He hated who he had been. And he has no idea who he was, except that the God King had named him Ausar. Or called him Ausar, called, same thing. So he gets dressed. Yeah, so she says that she's been waiting for him for weeks, and she got him a sword from Sadie's estate, from one of the fallen guards. And he takes it, and she says, you said your ancestors fought the God King, that your father, your grandfather went to fight and died. Have you considered that you didn't have a father or grandfather? Or at least if you did, they've been dead for thousands upon thousands of years. And he thinks, and he says, but the sacrifice, and she says, something in there is a lie, something big. You weren't born. And he remembers growing up as a child. And she suggests that he takes armor from one of the fallen Daryls in Sadie's palace. So he realizes now, finally, that instead of his ancestors, one after the next, son after father, son after father, it was every single time, it was him going to fight the God King. Every time, it was the same man, reborn again and again, with no wet memory of who he was before. Let's see. And she says, you wanted freedom, well, the God King has his weapon back, and he doesn't know where to find him, if he even cared to. And she doesn't think he'll bother focusing on Deathless with armies, lands, and influence, and she said that he could disappear, that he was free, and he realized this. And he thought, and he realized he couldn't do that, not leave the world in danger to the God King. And she says that she's going to follow after the Infinity Blade. And he stops her and says, I release you from your oath. And she asks what it means. And he said, not to kill me when they next meet, if he's not himself, if he's truly become a Deathless again, he wants her to do what she needs to do. And she says, alright, that's problems. And Tell comes in going, oh bad, 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 oh dear, oh dear. And he actually says it like that. I'm not just like adding in extra ones to exaggerate it. He actually says it like that. And he was made of wood again, like he was the first time they met. And he said, oh, this is so bad, this is bad. I'm supposed to destroy the body. Orders, my commands. You must be reborn as a child. Oh, terrible day. And Cyrus commands him to stop, and he says, I'm your master, aren't I? I'm the Deathless that you spy for. It's me. Before his memories went away, I ordered you to watch over me, didn't I? And Tell says, oh, very bad. Master, I tried, I followed her here, but she locked the door. I hid outside for weeks, couldn't get small enough to slip in. She locked the door every time she went out. He says, I tried, I promise I tried. And he says, tell me about my brothers as a child. And he says, I did as commanded, master. Each rebirth I brought you as a baby to young women, finding you a home so you could grow up from childhood. I altered the woman's memory to think you were her son, and to think herself married to the former sacrifice, just as you ordered. I made her move to a new town where she would not be known, so that people wouldn't know that she was never pregnant. And he said, but this is wrong, so wrong you'll have memories, terrible memories, master, terrible, terrible. And he knows that, and let's see, he said if the God King had left the bodies, the armor would be gruesome to recover, but not as recover as going into combat without it. If he did that, he'd likely end up dead. And he thought, hell take me, that doesn't really matter, does it? That it really doesn't matter anymore, does it? He tries to get Tell to tell him who he was before, and he said, I am commanded not to speak of that. Commanded. And Cyrus says, but I am the one who commanded you. I now rescind that command. He says, not possible, not possible. You said I cannot, I will not. He says, fine. He thinks, fine, I'll work on it later. And he said, who was the one who claimed to be my ancestor, the one I killed in the chamber beneath the God King's palace? Did slaying him truly awaken the Infinity Blade, make it capable of killing Deathless? And he said it did. But Cyrus said he wasn't really my ancestor. He couldn't have been. If all this is true, I have no ancestors, at least not any that would be alive. And he said, and Tell says, he was your son, master. Sometimes you did not fight the God King. Sometimes, some generations, I could not change enough memories to make you the sacrifice. Other times you refused to come. That man, he was a child of yours during a generation when you married, grew old, and had children. That one was chosen as the sacrifice instead of you. He joined the God King instead of fighting him. So yeah, he realizes that every time he dies and is reborn, it'll bring back more memories of who he was before. He said it'll get worse, and Tell says much worse. Each rebirth will make it worse. You will become him again, master. Him. So there actually was a cost. And he says, I'll be certain not to die then. And Tell tries to convince him to become a child again and lose all of his memories again. And And he said it was tempting. He could banish all of it. Would that not be the freedom he had sought? But if that was the case, he said, why the sacrifice? And he said, there wasn't one at first. You've always hated Radriar, and I think you responded to his search for someone to use in activating the Infinity Blade. You went to fight him in one of your generations, and he took note of you, and thinking that you were the child of one of the Deathless. So so the God King created the sacrifice, the entire tradition, and Cyrus often wanted to fight him, and when he didn't, and when Tel didn't make him the sacrifice, he'd declare himself to be the one who had to fight him and just go do it anyway. And he said it seemed best to just start making you and others around you think you were the son of this former sacrifice. People had started to remark about the similarity in their features. Anyway, so Cyrus vaguely remembered going to the God King every time and fighting him. He just barely remembered it dying over and over again. And he said, if I die, you will bring me back here to be reborn with his memories. And he asks if he'll do it, and the Golem says, yeah, okay, I'll obey if you make me to. And the last thing Cyrus says is, we're going to locate the Worker of Secrets. I will free him, and then we will find a way to fight back. Not because it was meant to be, but because he chose to. For now, the list he'd written in his logbook, a list of things that he wanted to do, would wait. The truth was he'd probably already done all the things, everything on the list 100 times over, even if he didn't remember. Saving the world, though, that was something he was certain he'd never done. So yeah, that was the first book. Sorry it was such a lengthy explanation. I was only expecting to make this like a 20-minute explanation, if that, but it took me that long just to get through the first couple chapters. So I'm going to work on making and uploading videos of the second game, finishing up uploading the first game, and there's a lot more stuff in the second game to show you guys, a lot more, well, just more. More secrets, more expansions, more cool stuff, bigger maps, all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please leave a like if you have, and subscribe, and until next time, good day.